So, on today's podcast, we're reframing this word accountability and talking about the ways in which we can acknowledge positive accountability, the intentional ways to stimulate, celebrate, and breathe some good oxygen into all the ways we are accountable to each other and the mission at hand. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome in. So glad you are here. We're in Season 9, about 270 or so episodes. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. So glad you're here. I invite you to go back, Google my name, Google whatever topic you're looking for as it relates to leadership, culture, mission, vision, values, communicate, whatever that is, trust, whatever the topic is that you're thinking about. And my guess is that something will come up, an episode in this 270 that hopefully engages your mind and your heart. Been lucky to have so many different thought leaders, friends of mine, join me on this podcast. So much great stuff out there. I hope you go back and check it out. And if you are one of the folks that have been with us from the very beginning, so glad this continues to add, value to your life, to your work. My commitment to everybody on this podcast is every time I record one, I want this to be an opportunity wherever you are and however you're listening to this, a chance for you to step back, for you to think about the temperature that you're hoping to set in your life and your work, and then also to hopefully have some good oxygen breathed into you, some ideas, some thoughts, some stories, some examples, some questions that make you think and help you on the next leg of your journey. So that's what we'll aim to do again today. Before we dive into today's topic, if you'll do me the quick favor, if you will rate the podcast 5 stars, that's super important. Thank you for everybody that on whatever platform you listen to, rate the podcast as a whole 5 stars. If there's particular episodes you really loved, rate those. If you'll leave an authentic review, again, your own words, not what I'm telling you to say, whatever you think about why these messages are important in the world, why they resonate with you. That helps the algorithms work so more people can find it. And then also, lastly, every time you share the podcast, whether that's on social media, hey, here's an episode that resonated with me and why, or within your team and your organization to say, hey, let's listen to this episode and let's talk about it together. Those are ways in which the content continues to grow, spread, and make an impact with more and more people. So I'm grateful for everybody that takes a moment to do that. Thank you. The word accountability is often thought of in such a negative connotation. But the concept of accountability needs to be reframed and, in my opinion, kind of redefined. This is the one word I hear on every team and every organization I enter is they talk about the word accountability. And often it's we need more accountability, and it's our job to, quote unquote, hold each other accountable. I hear it all the time in every team and organization I walk into. They want this kind of accountability. They identify it as a need and something that they want to work on. And so oftentimes what I hear and what I see in the culture and the way that we're developing people and cultures is that there's an opportunity to redefine what true accountability even looks like and how we might approach it from a slightly different angle. Accountability, as defined by Webster's dictionary, the definition, they say that it means, quote, an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. An obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. And to accept responsibility, to account or own one's actions is what it means to be accountable. Yet, we often talk about accountability in this kind of typically kind of a negative connotation. It is typically when someone hasn't lived up to their end of the bargain or their actions need to be questioned. We say we need to kind of hold them accountable. However, Accountability is actually a good thing. It's a positive thing. But I'm not sure we always talk about it or understand it or acknowledge the true meaning and power of truly being accountable to the mission, to ourselves, and to the people around us. So we often focus on the quote-unquote holding each other accountable part rather than the other very important part of it. I'll explain further on this episode. So on today's podcast, we're reframing this word accountability and talking about the ways in which we can acknowledge positive accountability, the intentional ways to stimulate, celebrate, and breathe some good oxygen into all the ways we are accountable to each other and the mission at hand. But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So I've often said that we need a better relationship with the word accountability. Unfortunately, again, it's taken on a negative association in the minds of many people because of the ways in which teams and companies and parents and coaches have talked about the word over many, many years. The focus around accountability has been so far leaning toward the items that don't get done that its meaning has been hijacked to mean the proverbial, slap on the wrist or accountability police, quote unquote, catching us doing something wrong. And so this idea of I'm going to hold you accountable has taken on a negative connotation that it only means holding you responsible for the things you don't do. And obviously, this is where the great opportunity within teams and organizations and personal leadership lies, is when we focus only on that part of the equation, which, again, is important to address the times when we haven't lived up to our end of the bargain or we haven't followed through on our actions, or somebody, hasn't done what they said they were going to do. Of course, we need to address that and probably have a courageous conversation and identify what happened in that situation. Of course, that's a piece of the puzzle, but that's not the only side of accountability. And when we only think about it from this negative frame of mind, then we miss something. And it misses the one valuable side of accountability. It's blurring the true and compelling element and essence of the word accountability. Because accountability it means this, being responsible, this accountability, this I'm taking ownership for my own actions, and I take account for my own actions. And so it's not only the things you don't do, but it's also all of the things that you do. Accountability is not a negative term. In fact, it's a very positive one. The problem has been that we only use the word or reference the word when we are identifying an act or person who has not lived up to their responsibility. The opportunity and mindset shift that's needed within our teams and organizations is to reclaim the true definition and begin to use the word accountability in positive ways. When an employee is on time and prepared for every meeting in a week, they have been accountable to their teammates and their duties. When a team member stops and acknowledges the performance or positive attitude of another team member, they are being accountable to the values they said that they desire as a team. When a husband or wife takes out the trash upon request of their partner, they are being accountable to the partnership they are committed to. So, the point I'm making is that every single day, we are often more accountable to each other than we are less accountable to each other. And every single day, we perform many, many tasks and actions that represent positive accountability. We just don't recognize or acknowledge these efforts nearly enough. And we haven't seen them as accountability. We've seen them as just, quote unquote, doing your job. Well, the reality is, every time we do those things, we are being positively accountable to each other, to our job, to our the mission of the organization, our role, the duty of the relationship, whatever that might be. And so then when we, quote unquote, hold each other accountable, when we miss the mark on something, unfortunately, that's the only thing that people hear. And the reality is we need to practice both sides of this. When someone only hears that negative edge, when someone, quote unquote, holds them accountable, then they begin to lose sight of all of their other positive, productive efforts. And this often, what it leads to, not only personally, for people, but also within teams and organization, is a lower self-value. It erodes trust, and it reinforces kind of a negative association with this word accountability. And so an ownership mindset within a team or culture means I'm accountable for me, and you are accountable for you, and we are accountable for us. And we have an opportunity, if we want to be responsible for this culture, is we get to breathe good oxygen of positive accountability into all we do because we sincerely want to uphold our end of the bargain. You've heard me cite the statistic that comes from the Gottman Institute out in Seattle that they in their research and study that they say that healthy and positive relationships, healthy and positive cultures have a 5-to-1 ratio. That's what their research shows. 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction, which means they start to train themselves in their eyes of, they point out, they catch the positive good things people are doing. And in doing so, they earn the right that when there is that one, time where, hey, we can do this better, now we can have a courageous conversation about it. We've earned the right to be able to say, all right, how are we going to do this better? And how do we own continuing to make progress in whatever it is that we're working on? Not surprisingly, in dysfunctional relationships or dysfunctional cultures, they have a 0.8-to-1 ratio, which means more negative interactions than positive interactions. These are the micromanaging, nitpicking bosses or people that are always catching us not doing what we're doing rather than reinforcing the good things we're doing and then having the courageous conversations about the things that we can do better. So we understand that we each play a significant role in the health of every team, of every relationship, of every culture, but a positive accountability, in my opinion, is one of the strongest forces on the planet, is when we recognize and appreciate and anchor all of the good stuff that people are doing. They start to do more of that and therefore are being accountable to each other and to the mission. A related image that somebody shared with me a while back, I'll share real quickly, is about a battery analogy. As you know, I'm not a very bright guy, but someone a while back explained to me how a battery works. And I think it's appropriate for what we're talking about here today, because this analogy is really helpful. They explained that a battery operates on an electrical circuit, and there are positive and negative. There's a positive and negative side of each battery, and they're always at play. And in fact, as they describe it, is both the positive and the negative are necessary. And as I hear somebody explaining this to me, it sounds like an image that already resonates with me. I think about our lives, I think about our relationships, our teams, our organizations. I think about the world as a whole right now, and you realize that the forces of positive and negative are always at play. And in fact, they will always exist. And the super cool element of how a battery actually works is, as they continue to explain this, they said the reality is how the battery gets its power is when the electrons are pulled from the negative side to the positive. That's the moment when the battery actually gets its power. The energy transferred from the negative to the positive is what gives the battery its power. And so this image is powerful because, again, as you think about our lives, our relationships, our teams, our organizations, and certainly our world right now, the power comes when we're able to pull the energy from negative to positive. It's a fancy way of saying, again, there are always going to be positive and negative elements at play, but to be able to identify those things that might be on the negative side and say, all right, well, what are we going to do about it next? And how do we help pull that energy to positive? And let's reframe it and say, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? What do we need to work on it? How do I take personal accountability and positive accountability for it? And how do you and how do we? So how can we make this situation better? And how are we responsible for our own actions? And what will we do next to positively account for this and for each other? So on this podcast, you've heard me talk about emotional intelligence a lot, and a lot of this has to do with us knowing and recognizing and being aware of and understanding ourselves and other people, but the awareness that our behaviors and our mindset impact our response. And so what actions we choose to develop as a relationship or a particular situation comes down to our own awareness around that, and then what is it that's important to us? And our own thoughts, our own minds, our own stories, and what we choose to focus on matter. So, as always, I'll try to leave you with some questions to ponder for today. How could you and your team reframe accountability in this more positive sense? How could you catch each other and acknowledge all the ways that you are positively accountable to each other? And what opportunities exist to take greater ownership in the mission or with each other? I hope those questions get you thinking and breathe a little good oxygen into you today. I hope today's episode got you thinking in new ways. If a deeper dive or any feedback or questions or anything would be supportive to you and your team, I hope you'll reach out to us, info@jasonvbarger.com, or you can track us down just through the jasonvbarger.com website or on social media @jasonvbarger. And we'll continue to try to help support and kind of meet you where you are. And hopefully the content that we're putting out continues to resonate with you. Lastly, I'll just remind you to go back and listen to a number of the past episodes, and I hope they add value to you. I hope you rate, review, share episodes that resonate with you. And I'll just say cheers to you and cheers to all of us on the road ahead. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. And we've got an opportunity to get clear on what is the temperature we're trying to set, and then the courage to continue to breathe good oxygen into that for each other and to sustain our path forward. So I'll just remind us to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.